Reminder is that if you want CEUs as a BCBA or BCABA, please put your certification number in the chat. There'll be a magic secret word sometime within the presentation, and then we'll ask you to sign out with that same information. So with those reminders, I want to welcome Dr. Paul Gavoni. Dr. Gavoni is a results-driven and self-motivated leader that helps strengthen administrative teams through a dynamic and proactive approach for successful organizational development of initiatives across various areas. He's a leader and coach and consultant with an extensive experience across industries. He is also a prolific publisher of a variety of books and, of course, academic articles. I could go on and on and on, but a couple of his noted publications are The 5 Scientific Laws of Life and Leadership, Deliberate Coaching, a Toolbox for Accelerating Teacher Performance in Education, and Quick Wins, Accelerating School Transformation. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Gavoni. Thank you so much for joining us today, Paul.
Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm really excited to be here. I always love talking shop, which is, my passion. I'm in my passion right now, being able to share the science of human behavior, disseminate it, and maybe help people who are not familiar with it, get in touch with it, and help people that are actually using it, and maybe even think a little bit differently about how they apply it. I actually came into the professional field of human services through social work and stumbled across the science around 2003. Somebody said, hey, there's this class you can take, and if you go down there and take it, you get like $50 an hour. And of course, I was broke. You don't go into social work because you're trying to make a buck. You do it because you want to help people. And when I walked through the door and heard the professor open his mouth and start talking about the science, I'm like, oh my God, this is kind of what I thought the way things worked with people. And but now there's like terminology for it and there's methodologies, and it just really made sense for me. So I really look at the science of human behavior as the science of helping people. And that's going to be at the kind of the root of my talk today. And it's going to be taking like, I don't know, I like to say we 100 years of, research, and certainly it goes very deep. But bringing it down to these 5, what I call laws, and my co-author Brett Denovi calls laws, and just making it applicable to people. Now, a lot of people misunderstand the science, and I can't see where the chat is. I'm wondering, by the way, who do we have in here today? Are you a behavior analyst? Are you a counselor, social worker? Who's in here? And if you, ladies, if you can tell me what folks are kind of saying, because I can't see. I don't know why I can't see the chat.
So you can find the chat box at the bottom of your screen. There are 3 little dots next to the X, and oh, pardon me, that's it. On the very far right, there's a little symbol that has the chat box. But folks are saying BCBA. Lots of BCBAs. Yeah, lots and lots of BCBAs. I know we have some other folks in here. We have some state employees that work on our team as consultants, clinical ops / BCBA, social worker, QDDPs, networking support.
Okay, that's good. All right, so we got a little bit of diversity, and I just for the behavior analysts in here, I hope that I give you just a different look at what you're doing, how you're approaching things. And for anybody else, this is the science. You don't have to be a behavior analyst to apply the concepts that I'm going to share with you. And as I kind of started to mention earlier, that the science has been mischaracterized. It's been written about by really, well-known authors who have had like New York Times best-selling books, and they just didn't understand it. And it's a shame because it's hurt the science. And I think it's also kind of hurt the science that through no fault of their own, there's just been a bunch of scientists, right, running around. And, they're really good at doing the research and informing the rest of us. And without that, there is no field, right? So we need them. But on the other end of the spectrum is just a way to make it palatable to people and communicate it and tell stories to engage folks. And that's kind of where I feel like I sit at on that end. And of course, applying it. I've applied it across context. And I don't say this, I always feel like really uncomfortable talking about myself with this stuff. But I'm not patting myself on the back. What I'm doing is patting the science on the back and saying, I couldn't have done any of this stuff without the science. And none of it was easy, but certainly I couldn't have done it. So it's the science that helped me to train fighters across the world, heavyweight champions, national champions, state champions, local champions, using the practical application of the science. Helped to turn around failing organizations, helped to turn around failing schools, which I'm very proud about. That was a very difficult thing, but stumbling across the application of the science through organizational behavior management, which is some of the stuff that I'm going to talk to you about today. It's rooted in that. And everything I've done, I've put out there. You don't have to buy it. By the way, if I talk about any books in here, I make it like a quarter at most off of books. They've not done any of the publication I've done to make any money off of books. We've put it out there to help people. My latest book, Quick Responses, with some just gangster behavior analysts. One of them is in here today, Andrew Hooveris, Anika Costa, Frank Rukowskis, Eric Gormley. We spent a long time in schools, and if anybody's working in schools, the stuff in here is just practical application of the science, but it's looking at things through an OBM lens, organizational behavior management lens. For those of you who are not familiar with that, that is really when you start to look at applying the science to groups of people. And this is a way that we can really benefit the learner, that if you're used to working individually with a learner or a client or however you want to approach that term. Well, usually there's people in the organization, in the building, in the room, even at home, that if we're going to bring out the best in that person, we got to bring out the best in the people around them. And so it's powerful. And I stumbled across this science back in 2006 when a school was trained in school-wide PBS, and I walked in there and the school was a mess, and the deputy superintendent said, "Hey, do you think you can help turn the school around?" I thought, hell no. It was a mess. What am I going to do with this stuff? But I figured, well, there's a science out there, so th probably there's something I can do to help. And I thought, well, I think we need something like school-wide PBS for the teachers, because I didn't see the teachers engaging in any of the behaviors, and they were sad and they were crying, and it was very difficult for them. They were good people, and they just didn't know better. They hadn't been trained better. And somebody said, well, there is kind of like a PBIS for teachers, and it's called OBM. And somebody put the book Bring Out the Best in People in my hands, and so I just went forward with it. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I've been able to make a difference in places and help people to help themselves and help others. And that's why Brett and I actually wrote this book. So there's a few things that you're going to learn today. You can just read that for yourself. I'm not going to read it verbatim to you. But what I want for the behavior analyst in here, I hope that I'm able to shift your vision and your view and broaden your scope in the way that you practice. If you're not a behavior analyst, I hope that you see that, you know what, this science of human behavior stuff is pretty cool. And if I learn a little bit about it, whatever I'm doing, I can help myself be better, and I can help other people be better. And that makes me happy. And if you're in the human services field or an educational field, using the science, you can make a large difference in an individual, in a group of people, in organizations, and I believe across the world, helping people to understand the science, helping them to embrace it. This is my mission. So, there's a little bit of an issue with those in our field, and even if you're out of the field, I would say that we can apply this to you as well. And I certainly suffered from this, no doubt about it. I call it behavioral myopia. And behavioral myopia is this. In our field of applied behavior analysis or behavior analysis, or especially applied behavior analysis, there's an issue that when we work with a client, a student, a child, a person with disabilities, which is how most people see the use of the science, and thank goodness it is there to help people with special needs. What would we do without it? It's helped a lot of people. But the science isn't just relegated to that area. It can be used to help anybody, anywhere, and it can be used for people to help themselves. And unfortunately, this kind of weird thing happens, and that is As soon as we look beyond that learner, that vulnerable person, that person with disabilities, into the adults and start interacting with the adults around them, we forget about the science. And in general, if we're going to bring out the best in that learner, help them, meet their potential, we've really got to bring out the best in the adults around them. If you're in any sort of human services field, if you're in applied behavior analysis and you're helping, trying to help people, your goal should be to fade out, right? So we need to support the learner, but we're going to need to support the people that are regularly in that environment, right? So they can help to sustain that environment that you're supporting with and help to bring out the best in that person. Does that make sense to everybody? If you can just type in a yes, and darn, I can't find those dots. Oh, but there it is. Maybe that's it. Display, hide presenter view. I can't see what people are saying.
Do you see where on the bottom of your screen it says apps, and then there's like a person, and there's a little circle with a tail?
I
It's
see
like
now. I don't have that. I have like the three dots in last view, hide presenter view, screen. Maybe it's under that or display settings. Is it
further
that?
over to the right.
Mine's the bottom left. I literally have nothing to the right of my screen.
Hmm.
Well, that's okay. Well, we'll just keep going with it. Just if did I get any response on that?
Yes, you got lots of yeses in the chat box, and you got some thumbs up going up beside the screen.
Okay, all right. That's very cool. Thank you guys. So honestly, here's the thing, and this happens to behavior analysts as well, right? If um, you know, this behavioral myopia stuff is serious because people tend to be poor observers of the behavior, poor observers of the impact of their behavior on the environment, and poor observers of the impact of the environment on their behavior. And folks that aren't in the field, and even folks who are in the field, please know that your thoughts and feelings are also behavior. It's just that it's behavior that you can only observe. And that stuff is impactful, but those behaviors, what you do or what you think and feel, they can become precursors to overt behaviors, right? And those overt behaviors could, either move you towards reinforcers or move you away from those reinforcers, right? What you value. And so it ends up not being about your
Dr.
intent.
Polly,
Yes.
it's Rita Cooper. We're not seeing anything from your slides or anything, so we're kind of at a disadvantage.
Oh, okay. I don't know what's happened. I did the slide. Oh, I know what's happened. I am so sorry to everybody. I guess I didn't hit the share screen here.
That's okay.
All
WebEx
right.
is sometimes new to folks, so we appreciate believe us, we all appreciate
Uh,
the challenges technology represents for us.
can you see? Let me see. Is anything sharing now?
No,
Let me
I'm
see.
afraid not yet.
Um, share. How about now?
Mm, no.
It's weird. It's showing me stop video, share content. Um, honestly don't know what's going on. I hit the share button. There we go.
Oh,
Here we
it's
go.
coming up. Whoa, we've got it.
Okay. All right. And now, do you see my screen or do you see the note screen?
We're
See the
seeing the
note
note screen, the presenter view.
Okay. That's my incompetence to everybody that's listening. Because certainly when we got on here, Rita walked me through it and Kate to make sure that it was all good. So I apologize, everybody. But great. Maybe explains why I couldn't see people talking in the chat. Now I see some different things here. Okay, cool. All right. Well, there's the goofy picture of me in the cartoon. You missed that. There were the objectives that I suggested that you guys read. You can learn about some of these components of the five laws and some critical leadership techniques for improving performance across settings. And I'm going to talk about what leadership it is. Leadership is not a role. It's functional in nature. And you can learn a little about performance diagnostics. But again, the main
We're
thing is,
seeing it in the presenter mode, not in the slideshow mode.
oh, okay, all right. So let me change that. Swap. How about that?
Excellent.
All right, we made it. There we go. All right. There's the behavior myopia. And all right, thanks for clearing that up with me. I think where was the last thing I left off on? The thoughts and
We
feelings
were
piece?
myopic at that point, right?
Okay, all right.
How the
Yeah,
corresponds.
I'm getting claps from people. Thank you guys. Um, yeah, our thoughts and feelings are actually behavior and being aware of those things. And I think what I was winding up at is that it's not about our intent, it's about our impact, right? So we might be trying to help people, but what's happening as a result of our behavior? What impact are we actually having on the people? And if you've ever done anything like blame others, say they need to do this and they're not, and what are they doing? All that kind of thing. And I've certainly done it. I know that I've done it. I just want to say that when I've done it, that means I no longer have on my behavioral lens because if somebody's not performing to a standard or doing something, we need to look at the environment and we need to consider why they're not doing it, what environmental adjustments need to be made. So we can't only focus on that learner in a school. And this is just a really easy analogy. By the way, who in here is supports like trauma informed care? Is that something that is supported in Missouri? Is that a thing? You guys type it in the chat or am I getting people with thumbs up and yeses? I'm still trying to figure out that. Oh, there that is.
Yes.
Okay, actually, I found the chat too. How about that? Okay, cool. Now, here's what I want to say about that, right? I'm going to apply this to education, and make it kind of behavioral in nature because there's a thing in our field saying, well, what is trauma informed care? And it's got to be kind of operationalized and defined. But I'm just going to look at it through an OBM lens, and we'll look at it in education. And we said, well, you know what? We want educators to be trauma informed. Well, if you're gonna support the needs of those learners in the classroom and you want them to feel safe and you want them to feel empowered and these principles that are aligned with trauma informed, well, we need the educators, the teachers to engage in some sort of behavior, right? And so what is that behavior? What does trauma informed mean? What do they need to do more or less or differently if they're trying to improve their environment? Does that make sense to everybody so far? So you can't talk about trauma informed without looking at the behavior of the people. If we talk in principles, we need to operationalize this stuff, right? We need to make it behavioral. And so the next piece of that is that, okay, you can't create a trauma informed environment for that student without creating that environment for that teacher. So if you want that student to feel safe and cared for and empowered and all these things that are aligned with the principles of being trauma informed, well, that same environment needs to be created for that teacher, right? How do we expect that teacher to support the needs of that student and help them to feel safe and respected and empowered and given choice if that teacher isn't provided that same kind of environment? Does that make sense to everybody? Again, that's my little formative assessment. Cool. I'm seeing little claps and everything coming up there. And if that's the case, then what I would ask is, what does that administrator now need to do more or less or differently to provide that type of environment? And what are the outcomes? Like, what are these metrics at the end that say, you know what? This is how we define it, and this is how we know we have this trauma informed environment. And so, whatever that is, whatever your environment you want it to be, you can't just look at the behavior of the learner and the goals of that learner. You have to look up the chain, right? And there's this, there could be, you can call it a results behavior map or reverse behavior engineering. I call it behavior change with the end in mind, right? What are the outcomes you want to produce? And what are the behaviors along the line that we need to get people to engage in to produce those outcomes, right? They're all interconnected, right? There's the interlocking behaviors, what we call meta contingencies. And this stuff is huge. So when I talk about behavioral myopia, I'm like, we need to broaden our scope and look at this stuff as a system. And we need to remember that it's not just about what's going on with that learner. It's about what's going on in the environment and in the adults in that environment almost always, and again, in this case, I'm just using education as an example, almost always they're going to need to change their behavior if they're going to change the behavior of the students. You guys with me on this stuff still? That all making sense? As I spent a long time on this behavioral myopia stuff, because it's a very important concept. Good, getting lots of yeses in there. It's so good to be able to see the chat. I'm glad to have made it there. All right, so let's move on. Now, you guys may or may not be in the role of a leadership, right? But I want to argue that your title doesn't matter. Have you worked with somebody who had a leadership title? but you wouldn't consider a leader if you have put yes. And I mean the type of person when you showed up to work, you and they were there, you kind of felt sick to your stomach, right? Their car was in, yes, I'm getting Uggs, yes. Doesn't it make you sick to your stomach? Now, I don't want to say that these guys are bad people, right? I want to say that they just don't understand the science of human behavior. Or if they understand the science of human behavior and it's, say, a behavior analytic organization, they are suffering from behavioral myopia. Because it's not about titles, right? All this stuff is functional in nature. It all you can shift all these you can shift all these hats, wear these different hats as you need to, right? For example, leadership is about inspiring people. We might call it a EO, towards like a common focus, right? It's getting everybody to look at this place, right? It's about influencing behavior. Management is about, or managing behaviors is about accountability, right? Like a leader or somebody that's leading kind of says, you know what, here's where we want to get, right? And here's how we can get there. And so if you're driving the car, you're going that direction. Well, the managers are making sure that you're staying within the bounds, right? Making sure that you don't run over the edge, so there you get tickets and this stuff, or they're still, reinforcing you, but they're using the tools that are available to them. Make sense so far? Training functionally is concerned with skill acquisition. And where the rubber meets the road, and where I like to talk about this a lot, is through coaching. And coaching, where training is about skill acquisition, coaching is about supporting the transference of learned skills into a natural environment. So you could do in vivo training. Hey, I got to put on my, I got to put on my training hat right now. Somebody doesn't have a skill. I need to give them that skill real quick, right? And now need them to do something well enough and long enough so that it produces some sort of natural and occurring consequence for them, which is very, very powerful. And that's the way we're going to get behavior to sustain in that natural environment. If we're trying to force people to do things, coerce them, we're not engaging in behaviors that help them to find, a reason why they should do it that's meaningful to them. Well, we'll be engaging them in what's called negative reinforcement, right? That's going to be the contingency, and we're only going to get people to be compliant. I'll touch more on that in a little bit. But in the end, it's not about title, right? What connects all this stuff is achieving valued results through key behaviors. And that's one of the beauties about our field is that we operate in parsimony. We want to keep things as simple, as practical as possible. And if we look at each one of those, right, each one of those titles, everything is still in an organization that in education, again, for example, because it's easy to think about that. One of the key results we're trying to produce is student achievement, right? A very important key result. And so there are different behaviors that everybody needs to engage in, depending on the role, that in the end, it produces this outcome. And in behavior analytic organizations, the same thing. In mental health organizations, and the same thing. In in the state organizations, it's the same thing. There's a bunch of people behaving in a certain way, and there might be departments, right? But the department's trying to produce this result, and another department's trying to produce that result. But together, they're moving towards some common desired results. Makes sense to everybody? Again, and that's all still coming back to behavior. So we always got to think behaviorally about things. And so what I want to do is, since we understand that all results require somebody doing, or especially if you're going to change results, doing something more or less or differently, we really need to focus on that behavior. So these five laws allow us to kind of either plan to make a difference, or figure out if we're not producing a desired outcome, what is going on, right? So it really helps us to problem solve. And it just makes it kind of practical and simple to people. So I'm going to break down each one of what we call these laws, like kind of like these immutable truths, right? Just to keep, it just keeps things very simple. Now, one of the issues we talk about is in law number one is pinpointing. The other one is just making sure that when we pinpoint, we are determining exactly precisely what result we want, and what behaviors we need to get people to engage in to achieve those results. So let me just give a little story here because this is where most people screw up, right? As simple as it sounds, most people don't get this right, and it's huge. It's everything. And so I see this across the board, right? Um, I see that the people engage in developing a plan. And a lot of these plans might have, we set some goals, right, within the plan. We want to set these some goals, and they're inspirational goals, and they might be SMART goals, which I'll explain shortly. But the important goals. But in order to achieve those goals, we have to look at the hood and we have to start outlining the behaviors people need to engage in. For example, going back to a school analogy, because it's just easy to do and it's fresh in my head. If we want to change suspensions, right? We want to reduce suspensions. This is a lagging result that we want to achieve. Well, if the school's having lots of behavior problems, there's probably a lot of behaviors that the adults need to engage in. So it might be that if we did an assessment, like what's going on, well, teachers haven't been trained in classroom management and they don't have a classroom management plan, or there's no school-wide behavior management plan. And so pinpointing uh, what behaviors they need to engage in first, say, okay, they need to do this. Well, that's what they need to be trained in, right? So we need to get them to write a plan, and we need to train them in behavioral principles, and then we need to get them to, teach that plan and deliver it and observe behavior, reinforce and correct it. And so who's going to deliver the training? When are they going to deliver the training? What is precisely the content? And then once the training's delivered, how are we going to support that training? Because training is an antecedent. It won't stick without consequences that help to maintain it, right? So who's going to be delivering those consequences? And when we talk about consequences, let's make sure we're getting people in touch with as much positive reinforcement as possible. How are we going to measure it? How are we going to give feedback to it? All this stuff needs to be unpacked at the beginning. If it's not, it becomes trial and error. People get going with good intentions, but it goes nowhere because there's this precision of behavior that we need to look at. Makes sense to everybody? This is where a lot of people screw up at the beginning, is outlining these details. And thankfully, like in some organizations, there's common behaviors that we need people to engage in, right? Behavior analytic organizations, therapeutic organizations, schools. And so you can have a master list of these behaviors and these results, for each role. So it doesn't get confusing. Like, hey, these in general, this is what we need to do, right? And I'd like to say focus on pivotal behavior whenever possible, right? Behavior that, I don't have to teach you all the stuff. Let me teach you these couple of things. And if I teach you this, you're going to be able to you're going to be able to learn more and get in touch with more reinforcement. For example, coaching, and we're going to come back to this for leadership. A pivotal behavior here is asking questions, right? Shifting from telling to asking, and I'll cover that in just a bit. But that's a pivotal behavior because you can learn a lot and it allows you to assess, and it's a great way to help determine what's going on in the environment that you can't necessarily always see. So that is pivotal. Delivering feedback is pivotal. So pinpointing, all right? Again, you have results, right? Like you're driving in GPS. You don't have a general result when you're going to go visit somebody. You have a pinpointed result. You're trying to get to a very specific destination, and that is an address, right? And so then you have to engage in some very pinpointed behaviors. It's more than one way to get to an address, but it's still very specific behaviors that we need to do to get there. But now the other issue is that when people aren't performing well, and going back to when I said, we tend to blame, there's a reason why. And a performance diagnostics, and I've put this in all my books with my co-authors. I have free articles online. Please go read it. I have videos on it. It's one of these pivotal things, right? Again, pivotal behaviors, understanding how to engage in performance diagnostics. It's very simple. If somebody's not engaging in a behavior, there's generally only two reasons why. All right. Go type just one of those reasons in there. If somebody's not performing to a standard, there's two general reasons why, right? What are those reasons? Can't do exactly. And what's the other one? Right? Won't do. And that would be like the no reinforcement. Yeah, it's can't or won't, right? Skill deficit or it's a performance deficit. And the intervention for each is drastically different. You can set up all the reinforcement you want in the world, but if somebody doesn't have a skill to do something, all that's going to do is piss them off because they want that reinforcer, but they can't do it. So we got to make sure that they have those skills. And, if it's not a skill deficit, then we need to think about, all right, what's going on, right? So what is the motivational issue? So here's some general categories, right? So when we're looking at performance diagnostics, we're thinking about antecedents in training, right? Are there clear goals and expectations? Do the people know they're supposed to be doing this stuff? Can they actually explain what they're supposed to be doing? That's an easy way. Hey, do you know what you're supposed to be doing? Can you tell me what you're supposed to be doing? Can you actually demonstrate what you're supposed to be doing? Are there some sort of prompts or job aids in the environment that remind you? Because sometimes it's not that people don't want to do it and that they can't do it. They just forget. They just forget. And they're not in the habit of it. So we got to create an environment that prompts them. I remember when I used to create school improvement plans with the people and like wanted people there in the morning for arrival time to greet the kids and reinforce them from walking on the right side or have them stop and walk back before they started running. Very simple behaviors. Um, but I knew that in the morning they weren't going to just remember to be at their post. So we had a little good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming to school. Hey, please attend your post and have a great day. Very simple, just a little reminder to get there because people, especially teachers, they're busy, they're trying to plan and they could forget that kind of stuff. Are there equipment and processes? Now, again, just using education as an example, a process might be a classroom management plan, right? There's all these routines and procedures in there, right? In this classroom management system, which is made up of processes, which is the processes are made up of tasks and behaviors, right? So do we have these things in place? Because this makes things easier, right? Having a process, this routine is a really good way to help people get in the habits. It just guides them, right? Again, I mentioned the knowledge and skills of it. Now, people are wondering about the motivation and consequences, certainly, right? When it's that piece of it. This is where we really need to lift up the mirror for ourselves, for a leader, a manager, behavior analyst, whatever role you have, right? Our job is to help people perform well in the end. So, and this could be a learner, right? So, it could be how often is that performer being observed? If they have all the other things going on, right? They know what to do, they know the goal, they have a process, all this stuff. Are they being observed? Are they able to see the impact of their performance, right? I'm engaging this stuff, but is it producing an impact? And is that impact reinforcing to them, right? Because if you don't have reinforcement, you don't get behavior. And if it's not positive reinforcement, then there's a good chance that they're only going to be doing it when you show up to observe. And I mean, that is some performance, that's just the way it is, right? But if we get pivotal behaviors in touch with positive reinforcement, the rest is going to kind of come along with it. How often are they receiving feedback and what kind of feedback is that? Are we catching them being bad, right? Or are we using shaping, right? That's rooted in positive reinforcement to get incremental improvement in performance, which is going to establish us as a positive reinforcement, a person of value, a positive stimulus, somebody who you want to be around. This is how we get the best out of people. And then finally, are we asking people to do too much? You can only do one or two things at a time, right? We in behavior plans, we only focus on a couple of behaviors and we get those going. And then we focus on a couple more. And certainly when you go into an organization, or it could be somebody's home, it could be a classroom, it could be your own department. There's probably lots of things that can be better, but you can't focus on everything, right? If everything is important, nothing is important. So we go small, we think small, make small change, and that actually accelerates movement towards the end goal, right? This result that we want. Does that make sense to everybody? Start small with things. Don't try to make things big because nothing will be important. Even with my fighters, just simply focusing on like changing, pivoting their back foot when they're throwing a punch is incredibly, powerful for helping them move in the right direction. All right. So the next piece of this puzzle is, and the second law is goal setting. Now, you've probably heard some of this stuff like SMART goals, and I'm going to break that down in a second. Another pieces I want to involve in performance. I'm going to unpack that for a second. But I just want you guys to know that there is science behind goal setting. A lot of science behind it. I don't have it in my notes here, and so if I misquote this, please forgive me. But there's two important pieces of this, and that is one, if if just the act of writing down a goal increases the likelihood that people will achieve that goal by like 30%, right? Oh, I hear it. I think I might have it on the next slide here. Um, and so yes, it's 33%. I was close to it, right? 33% just the act of getting them to write it down, right? So simple things. Here are some simple ways to get people to achieve SMART goals. Now, SMART is an acronym, and in a lot of places it stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and tracking, I think. Now, the SMART I took from Scott Geller, and I love his work. It's like the compassionate application of applied behavior analysis. I would highly recommend you check out any of Scott Geller's work if you can. But his SMART acronym is specific and motivational, right? And the T being the measurable part, and it's tracking. And so I would argue that a goal is not really smart if people aren't motivated by it. And so, how do we get people motivated to the goal? Well, there's some certain things, right? Like involving people in setting the goal. You never want to do things to people, you want to do things with people, no matter how well intended you are. If people don't find value in it, right? They're going to only do it as a compliance measure. And we don't want people just engaging in behavior towards goals unless we can find goals that are driven by common values. And so, how do we find that? Well, there's different ways. There's lots of research out there that supports motivational interviewing, a shorter read on it, and actually it's grounded in 35,000 sales calls. There's a book by Neil Rackham called Spin Selling. Now, spin and selling is kind of aversive to me, but it's just an acronym. And what it says is find out, and I'm going to make this very behavioral. What are people's reinforcers? What's blocking access to the reinforcers? What are some other issues that might be resulting from, these obstacles that they might not necessarily realize? So kind of shining a light on that, we could say that's some sort of MO there. And then once we really help people find that, and then they might be willing to engage in behavior change. But it starts with what's important to people, right? What are the reinforcers? Setting small goals, right? They're achievable. This just puts you in a position to positively reinforce more. Finding quick wins. Think about quick wins like behavioral momentum, where we're getting people to engage in something that's low response effort, right? Easy to do, and that produces visible and valuable outcomes for them. When I've had to turn around failing schools with a group of other people, we always started small, right? What was a quick win? We'd start with the hallways. Let's shape this up, the arrival time, the dismissal time, transitions, the cafeteria. These were large areas where we got people to engage in just a couple simple behaviors, and it produced this large scale visible outcome, and that gave buy-in to me, and also like it gave buy-in to the science. We were like, hey, this is just a science. And like, well, this science stuff kind of works. Let's do it somewhere else. That's right. Identifying accomplishments. Now, this is like really critical. Thomas Gilbert, who has, you know, he's the father of human performance competence technology. I might be saying that wrong, but this is a brilliant and simple thing. When you have a result, right, and you have behaviors that you need to achieve this result, there are lots of things that need to occur in between. That result might not move. Going back to the suspension example, I talked about that maybe teachers need to be trained, right? So an accomplishment might be the number of teachers who are trained. It could be that, how many teachers now have written a classroom management plan. That's an accomplishment. It could be the number who have taught the classroom management plan. Now, all this time, that result might not move. But these tasks can then be positively reinforced, right? It's an accomplishment for the person that's doing it. It's an accomplishment for the people in the organization so they can see there's something salient. So making progress salient so you can positively reinforce it is huge because there's nothing worse than feeling like you're not doing your job, right? And a lot of times, if we're only leading or managing or engaging in behavior analysis by only looking at the results, the end result, it might not feel like anything's going on, right? So we got to think about this as shaping. So we find metrics and we make them salient for people. We call this accomplishments. So that's a huge and simple thing. And of course, Premac principle, something easy. Get people to, do the things that they don't care about. Eat your vegetables first before you have your dessert. So that's grandma's rule. Just simple things to get people to engage in some sort of movement towards goals. So let's look at this next simple piece. And this is like, it's simple, But all this stuff is incredibly important. Now, we might identify what result we want to achieve, identify the behaviors, right? Set some goals, right? So we're quantifying everything by setting goals and sub goals and accomplishments. But now we got to make sure that people are moving the right direction, right? And we can do this with self monitoring and reporting out. Now, I can't go out and look at 30 people, on a regular basis, but can certainly maybe have 30 people look at their own behaviors, right? Again, it's a smart goal, they value achieving the goal, they have the knowledge and the skills to do what they need to do, and the processes and all this stuff's in place. I can get them to self monitor their behavior and report out. I deal with coaching all the time. As I mentioned before, a pivotal behavior is questioning. So, and people understood that it was a pivotal behavior, but they need to change their habits. So I'd get them to shape or to give them to self monitor and report out to me on a regular basis. At first, it was like daily. Hey, they would say how many times, how many people they engaged in question asking, what kind of question they asked, et cetera, et cetera. But we would set up like who they're reporting to is me. What were they reporting to? The number of times they engaged in some sort of questioning, right? When they did it, hey, at the end of the day, they did it. Where are they going to do it? Well, they were going to do it from wherever they were at, but they were going to text it to me because part of this whole piece is making sure things are simple. Didn't have to be complicated. And when they did it like regularly, that probably took them 3 minutes to put that text in. By the end of the week, they started to develop a habit, and then we could fade out to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday the next week, and then maybe it's just Wednesday. And finally, it's a habit because when they start asking questions, they're like, "Wow, things are getting better for me." It's a naturally occurring positive reinforcer, which is ideal. But I just had to get them to behaving well enough and long enough to do it. And that was the supporting. And I would ask them questions about their questioning, right? So I could give them some feedback on it because I can't see everything. But it allows me to either positively reinforce what they're doing or help them to correct some errors that they might be making with their questions. That makes sense to everybody so far? I get some yeses in there. Yes, simple stuff. All right, and I got about 15 minutes. Thank you for the countdown here. And we are moving right along. What slide am I on? Yeah, I got about 9 slides left. Thank you for that. All right. So everything needs to be simple. Complexity is the enemy of sustainable execution, sustainability, and scalability, right? So keep it simple. And yes, Mr. MG, it is a feedback loop, right? But here's the other end of that feedback loop, what we call reciprocal feedback. And this is really important because what it does is it recruits feedback. When you have a system of self-monitoring report out, it prompts the loop, right? It gets the loop going because now you're reporting out to me, and I've agreed that I'm going to provide some sort of feedback. Now I know, oh, but that's a prompt. I got to make sure I give some feedback on it, right? So it keeps this loop going, right? So one of the things that we need to know is that we want to make sure that feedback is not one way. This is a big mistake. It doesn't go down, right? It's bi-directional. There's some good research out there, some good stuff. I don't know if you guys have picked up the Supervision book by LeBlanc Sellers. It's fantastic. I love their book on supervision. My buddy Adam, calls it bi-directional nature. But we need to look at when somebody's performing, right? We need to look at their performance as feedback to us as a leader, a coach, or whatever is going on, right? What do we need to do more or less or different? If their performance is moving in the right direction, great. It looks like I'm going to use that feedback. I'm going to keep doing this. If it's not, what do I need to do more or less or differently, right? But it doesn't stop there. I also need feedback to know how am I doing for you as a leader, manager, coach, behavior analyst, whatever it is, right? I need to know, do you feel, right, that what we're working on is valid, right, is important to you? And if you've done good goal setting, right, it should be socially valid. And also, how's my approach for you? And this is a big error that people make, right? This happens in organizations everywhere, and they do this thing called like a climate survey at the end of the year. And what I would argue is that that's a freaking autopsy. What are you going to do with a climate survey at the end of the year? The end of the year. What they need is regular feedback, right? To let people know, leaders, managers, whatever your role is in the organization, how people are feeling about things. So that way they can respond to it regularly. And sometimes it's just a messaging issue. And so you can explain, like, hey, I understand you guys are upset. Here's why we're doing this. Or we can say that, you know what, these folks got a good point, and let's adjust the systems. And how good does it feel if you are working somewhere and you're letting people know that things aren't working well and they respond to it? Doesn't that give you buy-in for leadership? Isn't that a place that you want to be? Right? So it's very important, or at least if you know the why. The other piece of this thing I want to say is that make sure that if you're not in a leadership role, don't forget to give feedback up, right? And positively reinforcing feedback. It's difficult being up there. So, and the science of human behavior is omnidirectional, right? You can use it to help that leader become better. Use the same principles. Hey, I love what you're doing. You know, you were doing A, B, and C, and here's the outcomes they're producing. It's so meaningful. Let them know because they might not even know this. Remember, I said people are poor observers of their behavior and the impact of the behavior on the environment and vice versa. So, this is incredibly important for people to use feedback all around them, okay? And recruit feedback. Even if stuff isn't formal, ask people, hey, how you feeling about what I'm doing? I do it regularly. How, is this working for you? And one of the biggest measures for yourself, if people can tell you, like, I feel kind of uncomfortable with this, I mean, this isn't working for me. The fact that you create an environment where they can share things with you that way, or if they can share with you that they've made a mistake, that's a good metric to let you know that you are really moving in the right direction, right? So pat yourself on the back. If you're not getting that, it's okay. Hopefully I'm like broadening your vision. You take a look at what you're doing and what you might be able to do more or less or differently. That's all. And you can do it. If I can do it, I'm nothing special. I'm just consistent. If I can do it, you can do it. There's no doubt about it. This is definitely the pivotal behavior talked about. This changed everything for me. If you guys are in here and you're a knowledge holder, right? And you're somebody who helps people a lot, what'll happen is people will come to you for a lot of stuff. They want help on things, right? And so,
Dr. Polly, this
yes,
is Rita. We need our code word in there, and our code word from our previous two slides is feedback. That is critical element in everything we do, that closing that loop for feedback. So get that in the chat quick. Thanks
thank you,
for
Rita.
allowing me to interrupt.
Oh, thank you for that. I'm sorry. I missed my own prompt that I put on the slide. Let's make sure everybody gets that in there. Thank you, Rita. Okay, so this piece of shifting from telling to asking, here's what will happen, right? If you're always telling people what to do, they will become prompt dependent on you and you will feel underwater. You don't want that. So your helping behavior can actually inadvertently hurt people. Right? We probably all been here. Have you ever gone somewhere a bunch of times, but you still have to use your GPS? The reason why is because you're prompt dependent. I have to wait for the GPS to tell me where to go because I'm not able to discriminate, right? These markers in the environment, stimulus environment that lets me know where I should be going. So I think that the brain scientists, the neurologists, the neuroscience people would say that I haven't strengthened my neural pathways, right? But the goal is the best leaders end up making more leaders around them. And so by asking good questions, and if you can see these are all behavioral in nature, people learn to better assess, problem solve, make decisions, and take action. But from a coaching, leadership, management point of view, training point of view, whatever it is your role is, if you asking these questions allows you to give people feedback, right? Allows you to, because you can't see everything. But if you can ask for a precision of questions, you ask good, precise questions and get good, precise responses, you can reinforce things that you can't necessarily see, right? But you can also maybe help to shape some things up that might not be going in the right direction. So all these things are behavioral in nature and still looking at behavior and results. And we're trying to get people in touch with reinforcement, right? So powerful things, very simple. But if you want to get yourself in the habit of asking questions, do what I did. I put prompts all around. I put yellow stickies. I put a list of these type of questions on my computer, on my shifter in the car, at my desk. I really knew this would help me, and it did. It did so much. So please take a look at adjusting your behavior here. And of course, not challenging questions. It's all questions to help people become better. All right, let me check my time here. Yeah, I think I'm doing all right. You want to make sure you're evaluating leadership and how. Well, again, the measure of the leader can be found in the behavior of the followers. The measure of the coach can be found in the behavior of the coachees and the trainer, and the behavior of the trainees, manager, the behavior of the manager, all this stuff. If you're BCBA supporting, supervising RBTs, the behavior, your behavior of supervision can be found in the behavior of the RBTs. It's not that they're going to be perfect, but you just want them to be a little bit better tomorrow than they were today. You want to shape that process up. So are you getting behavior change? Is that behavior change producing the results that you wanted, right? Are people satisfied with what you've got going on? And is the process being followed? So simple things, but we want to make sure things are going in the right direction. So remember that, in the end, and this is the fifth law, right? It's about getting people in touch with positive reinforcement, right? In the book, we call it pay for performance, but essentially we're getting your behavior paid, right? Your performance paid with something valuable. And of course, we know there's, two types of behaviors that get behavior going, right? We have positive reinforcement and we have negative reinforcement, right? That keep behavior going. Now, getting people in touch with the consequences of those reinforcers, or helping them to see the impact of their behavior, right? So shifting from that telling to asking, because you really want them to see the impact, right? That's getting them in touch with this naturally occurring reinforcers. So there's been some great work from Darnell Littell et al. Here. And Darnell, I don't know if you guys know Darnell. She used to be the CEO of Aubrey Daniels International. And she just came out with a book called Wisdom, just an amazing book. I had the fortune of reading ahead of time, and she is just wonderful. But she had some good research out a while back, and I have it actually on my slide. But there it is down there. There's the reference. But it's a great visual of this, right? This is one of the most prolific or powerful visions of reinforcement that I've ever seen. So remember that antecedent strategies are about getting behavior going in the right direction, right? Goal setting, telling people what to do, training. Those are all antecedents, right? They're all antecedents, right? They get behavior going. If we don't get behavior in touch with some sort of consequence, it's not going to sustain, right? Or if they engage in the behavior and there's something aversive happens, that could be a punishing consequence and they'll stop doing it. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to get them in touch with some sort of reinforcement. And initially, maybe it's negative reinforcement. Well, you need to, you try to involve people and you want to get behavior going and they're doing it just because people are going to come look. All right. But the goal being that eventually what they see is, and this is you coaching, giving feedback, or whatever role you're in, they see this. They see that there's some positive outcome that's been produced as a result of their behavior, right? So they're moving in this direction, and now we get this going, the consequence, get in touch with it. And now we're starting to get some sort of reinforcement, right? So we had that good speech, the good goal setting, we set up a good plan. All this stuff is powerful. It's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You need both, right, to get it going. And so this is us giving them some feedback as a coach or whatever role you call. It doesn't matter. We're trying to get people in touch with naturally occurring consequences that are going to sustain their behavior. And hopefully it's positive consequences, right? Because if it's positive reinforcement that we're getting people in touch with, that's the only way we get people to engage in discretionary performance or discretionary behavior or discretionary effort, meaning that they're going above and beyond. And this is what it takes to create habits, right? So really, when we talk about in behavior analysis, we're in the business of behavior change or whatever you're doing. If you're in human services at all, you are in the business of behavior change and getting people to change their behavior in order to produce better outcomes. But really in the business of habit change, right? Either habit development or habit change, because this stuff is over time. It takes time to develop habits. And so we need to shape that along the way. And we really want to focus on using some sort of positive reinforcement, right? And we want to use the right consequence. How do you know it's the right consequence? Well, Daniels and Aubrey Daniels is my guru. It's everything that I've read and taught has been rooted in a lot of the stuff that he put out in the world. Look, are people engaging in these types of behaviors? This is all types of behaviors that we know are letting you know that we're using some sort of positive reinforcement. Now, you've probably all said this and done this and heard this. This is how you know that, it's talk, right? Behavior talk, that you're getting some sort of behavior that, that is being driven by negative reinforcement. So simple yet powerful. So, here is the reference for a lot of my stuff. If you guys want to take the screenshot, I think they're sending this out. Do a screenshot real quick. There's some powerful stuff in here. And then if you need to get in touch with me, if you have questions, because I know there's not, there's no time for this, and I'm not certainly not going to step on the next presenter who is a gangster. I got to meet him in Missouri. He's a super guy. I'm excited that you guys are going to get to hear him talk. But reach out to me. I'm very accessible. I love helping people. There's my LinkedIn. I'm responsive on almost all my platforms. Would love to hear from you. And well, how was it today? Did I deliver for you? Did I give you what you guys were hoping would be helpful for you guys?
Yes, this was awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Dr. Giovanni, you hit the mark on target there. Excellent. And I'll give people a reminder, if you are wanting CEUs, please put your BACB number in the chat box and we'll capture that. Excellent, excellent, excellent. You delivered, sir. You delivered. And
Thank you guys.
as a reminder, Dr. Giovanni has a lot of accessible information on YouTube and on Instagram and all sorts of social media platforms. So reach out to him and I am sure he will answer any questions and support. And we love what you presented this morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. And John, good luck. I know you're going to crush it, brother. Hope to see you soon, my man.
I appreciate it, brother. If it's a gangster, I guess it's an OG, right?
That's right.
Gotta be an old one.
Right. Maybe getting up to double OG, brother.
There you go, man. Hey, thoroughly enjoyed